The truth in the quiet. The year was 1955, a world divided by color and the suffocating grip of segregation. Jim Crow laws were an iron fist across the South, dictating where a black man could stand, eat, or even look. Interracial relationships weren't just taboo, they were a death sentence. But even in the North, where the rules were unwritten, true freedom was a mirage. Oliver Bryant was born with the weight of this world on his shoulders. A tall, lean man with skin the color of polished mahogany. He had a quiet confidence that was a paradox in a world that demanded he be small. His hands, calloused from years spent fixing cars, moved with a grace that belied their strength. He was a mechanic, a man who spoke the language of engines better than he spoke his own. He was cautious, had to be. Had seen what happened to men who let their eyes linger on white skin. Then, he met Sarah Whitmore. She was a creature of a different world, one of silk dresses and manicured lawns. Her father, Charles Whitmore, was a man of power and influence, a businessman whose wealth was built on the old, ugly traditions of the South. He believed in bloodlines, in purity, in the superiority of his kind. But Sarah didn't belong in that world. She was a restless soul, suffocating under the weight of expectations. She was supposed to be demure, obedient, but she was curious, defiant, always searching for a life beyond the one laid out for her. They met in a smoky, gas-filled basement, one of the secret spaces where the color lines blurred under the cover of night. He saw her, and she was unlike any white woman had ever been warned about. No fear in her eyes, no hesitation. Her blonde hair fell like a waterfall around her shoulders, and her blue eyes held a dangerous spark: curiosity, excitement, defiance. She asked his name. He hesitated. She smiled, and in that smile, he saw a path he had been told to avoid his entire life. They talked 4 hours, their words weaving a tapestry of two disparate worlds. She was fascinated by his, and he was intrigued by her boldness. The air between them was electric, intoxicating, and utterly foolish. When the night ended, she asked to see him again. He knew he should walk away. He didn't. Their secret meetings were reckless, a dance with danger. One night, Charles Whitmore found them. Oliver was working late at the garage when Sarah appeared, her pale skin illuminated by a street lamp. He tried to usher her away, but it was too late. Her father's black sedan pulled up, and the world seemed to stop. Oliver saw the rage twist the man's face, the kind of fury only white men had the privilege of expressing. Charles grabbed his daughter, silencing her with a glare, and dragged her away. The next morning, a note was slipped under the garage door. "Stay away from my daughter." It wasn't a warning, it was a threat. And for the first time in his life, Oliver wasn't afraid of the man. He was afraid of what he was willing to risk for Sarah. Sarah, a captive in her own home, found a way to reach him. A note in the pocket of a delivery boy, a hushed word to a maid. She told him what they both already knew. Her father would never let them be. But she had made her choice. She had chosen him. It was a reckless decision, a criminal one. A white woman running away with a black man was a scandal beyond measure, a transgression that would be met with no mercy. But love, or something that felt like it, had never cared for laws. So, in the dead of a moonless night, they ran. With nothing but the clothes on their backs and the fire in their hearts, they boarded a freight train bound for Illinois, for a factory town where mixed-race couples were a rarity, but not illegal. The journey was long and grueling. They hid among crates and sacks of grain, their bodies stiff from crouching in the narrow space between cargo boxes. The rhythmic clatter of the train wheels was a constant reminder. There was no turning back. Oliver was always on edge, always listening, watching, but no one came. On the second night, they arrived. The factory town was a far cry from the elegant streets of Sarah's childhood. The air was thick with soot, the streets lined with weary, grey buildings. But here, they were just another couple. No one looked twice at a white woman with a black man. It wasn't acceptance, it was indifference, and indifference was enough. They found a cramped room in a boarding house, barely big enough for the narrow bed they shared. But it was theirs. Oliver took a job at the local steel mill, working 12-hour shifts in unbearable heat. Sarah, her once delicate hands now rough with calluses, found work as a seamstress. It was hard, grueling work, nothing like the life she had known. But she never complained, because for the first time, she had chosen this life. Their marriage took place in a tiny church on the outskirts of town. No guests, no flowers, no music, just the two of them and a preacher who looked at them with a mixture of pity and judgment. There was no ring, no celebration, just a quiet exchange of promises spoken not for the world, but for each other. Standing outside the church afterward, Sarah felt the weight of the moment settle in her chest. She was no longer Sarah Whitmore, daughter of privilege. She was Sarah Bryant, wife of a black man. And yet, she felt lighter than she ever had before. The first years were a test. The factory town was safer than the South, but it was not kind. Oliver's co-workers kept their distance, and the women in town looked at Sarah with suspicion. Money was always tight. Some nights, they went to bed hungry. Sarah learned to mend clothes until they were more stitched than fabric. Oliver worked overtime until his body ached. But they endured, because they had love. But love did not erase fear. Sarah's father had not forgotten her. Letters arrived, each one colder than the last. The first was a demand, the second a warning, the third a threat. Sarah burned them all, but the fear lingered. She knew he was not a man who accepted defeat. So, without telling Oliver, she began to save money. A few coins tucked beneath the mattress, then a few bills hidden in the hem of her dress. It was a precaution, she told herself, a habit born of fear. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had chosen Oliver, but a part of her still feared that one day she would have to leave him. The years passed. Their life settled into a rhythm. It was never easy, never truly comfortable, but it was theirs. And then the first child came. When their son, Isaac, was born, Sarah was terrified. She had expected joy, a feeling of family, but instead she felt a quiet, gnawing guilt. Because as she looked at her newborn son, she couldn't stop thinking about the child she had abandoned. She had been 17, a different girl in a different life. Her family had kept the pregnancy a secret, hiding her away, telling friends she was ill. When the baby was born, a boy just like this one, she had barely been allowed to hold him before he was taken away. Her father had arranged a quiet adoption, a discreet payment to ensure there were no records, no connection to the Whitmore name. Sarah had cried for weeks, but over time, she had learned to silence the ache. She had told herself it was for the best. And then she had met Oliver, and she had buried that past beneath a new life, a new love. But now, holding her son in her arms, the past clawed its way back. She had another child out there, a son who had been lost before he even had a chance to know her. She never told Oliver. The weight of that secret settled in her bones, a quiet poison that never fully left her. Isaac grew fast, his skin a rich blend of his parents' colors, his eyes sharp like his father's, his smile soft like his mother's. He was the first thing they had ever truly built together. And yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She dreamed of the child she had given away, wondered if he looked like Isaac, if he had her nose, if he had Oliver's steady gaze. She never spoke of it. Years passed, and another child came. Margaret. She was wild, a force unto herself, loud and unafraid. Sarah adored her, but with each passing year, the secret grew heavier. She imagined the boy she had given away, a young man now, living in some unknown city, perhaps wondering who he was. Oliver was no fool. He noticed her silences, the way she flinched when adoption was mentioned. He was a man of quiet patience, but this was different. His wife was slipping away from him. He respected silence, but this was a wall between them, and he wondered if he truly knew his wife at all. Sarah had convinced herself that the past was behind her, that the life she had built was separate from the one she had left behind. But the truth was that the woman she had been, the privileged daughter of Charles Whitmore, the girl who had been too afraid to fight for her first child, the young bride who had run into Oliver's arms not out of love, but desperation, had never disappeared. And now, as her body betrayed her, and the weight of time pressed down on her bones, she knew that the past was finally catching up. The sickness started slow, a cough, a dizzy spell, nothing she took seriously, but then the pain began, a sharp, relentless ache in her chest that stole her breath. Oliver saw it. He watched her wince, saw her struggle. One night, she collapsed on the floor while folding laundry. Oliver knew they could not ignore it any longer. The doctor came. He was a white man, middle-aged, his face unreadable as he pressed his fingers to her wrist. He spoke in a voice that was calm to calm. She was dying. It was her heart, he said, failing. Nothing to be done. Oliver stood in silence, his hands clenched. Sarah closed her eyes. She had expected fear, but all she felt was exhaustion. She had been running from so many things for so many years. Maybe it was time to stop. Oliver refused to accept it. He spent days searching for another doctor, another answer, another hope. But the answer was always the same. Her time was running out, and she knew that she could not leave this world without telling him the truth. She had spent a lifetime keeping secrets. It was time to set them free. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she asked Oliver to sit with her. He hesitated, sensing something different in her voice, something final. She told him everything, about the money she had hidden away, about her doubts, about how in those early years she had feared she would one day need to escape him. She told him about her first child, the son she had abandoned, the life she had been too afraid to fight for. She told him about her father, and how she had never truly been free of him. Finally, she told him the worst truth of all, that she had not married him for love. She had married him because she had been afraid. He had been her escape, not her choice. Oliver sat in silence. She couldn't read his expression. She felt the tears slip down her cheeks, the weight of a lifetime of guilt pressing against her chest. And then, she told him the only thing she knew to be true. That despite everything, despite the lies, the secrets, the mistakes, she had come to love him. Truly, deeply, more than she had ever thought herself capable of. She loved him, and she hoped, in the end, that would be enough. In the days that followed, Oliver said little. He took care of her, held her when the pain was too much, but he did not tell her how he felt. She did not ask. It didn't matter. He was still there, and for her, that was enough. One night, as the cold crept through the house, she felt his arms around her. He whispered something so soft, she barely heard it. As she closed her eyes for the last time, she smiled. She knew in that moment that he had forgiven her. Or maybe he hadn't. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe love wasn't about perfection. Maybe it was about choosing to stay, even when it hurt. The house was too quiet. Sarah was gone, and Oliver sat in the silence of their bedroom, staring at the empty space beside him. She had left him with a lifetime of secrets. Her confession had broken something inside him, not because she had lied, but because he had never truly suspected it. For all the years they had spent together, he had believed their love was real, built on trust, not necessity. Now, he didn't know what to believe. Had their life been a lie? The letters were still there, the ones from her father, yellowed with age, tucked away in the drawer where she had hidden them. And then, the last one, the one that had shattered her in those final weeks. "I know who you are," it said, in an unfamiliar hand. She had never told him what it meant, but now he had to know. He opened the drawer, his fingers shaking as he pulled out the stack of old papers. The last letter was brief, a single sentence. "Your son is looking for you." Oliver froze. The room tilted. He read the words again, his breath catching in his throat. Their son, not Isaac, not Margaret, the one she had given away, the one he had never known existed. His hands tightened around the paper. There had been another child, another piece of her that she had kept from him, a son who had been out there, searching for answers, and now she was gone, and all that was left were questions that could never be answered. Oliver sat in the silence, staring at the letter, at the truth of a life he had never truly known. And for the first time since Sarah's death, he let himself grieve, not just for her, but for the life they had built, a life he now realized had been filled with ghosts. The house felt different without her. It wasn't just the emptiness, the absence of her voice. It was something deeper. It was the weight of all the things left unsaid. He worked because it was the only thing that made sense. But nothing else was simple. Not when he walked through the market and felt the weight of strangers' eyes on him, their silent questions hanging in the air. Not when he lay in bed at night and reached for her out of habit, only to find the sheets cold and empty. And not when he opened the drawer and saw the letter waiting for him, taunting him with a truth he wasn't sure he was ready to face. One evening, after the children were asleep, he sat at the table and unfolded the letter again. There was no name, no address, just a single brutal fact. A son out there looking for answers, and Oliver was the only one left to give them. He wrestled with it for weeks. What good would it do to look for this man now? What did he owe a stranger who had never been a part of their lives? But then another thought came. What if it had been Isaac? What if someone had taken his son from him, erased him, made him a secret? Wouldn't he want to know? Wouldn't he deserve to? And so, one morning, before the sun had fully risen, Oliver left the house. He walked to the post office, the letter clenched in his hand. And for the first time since Sarah's death, he made a decision. He would find this boy. He would give him the truth that had been stolen from him. Even if it hurt, even if it changed everything. Because the past had already taken too much, and Oliver wasn't going to let it take anything more.